Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today we're looking at why US paper money is green. And just before we get started, I do want to say that this video is brought to you by Credit Sesame. Head over to creditsesame.com for your 100% free credit score and more. Now, today's video is all about paper money, but today most money is digital, and personal finance is also more important than ever. Financial education, credit scores, all very important for your future financial security, and that's whether you're looking to finance a home or a car or a personal loan, whatever. Well, you can use Credit Sesame easily and 100% for free to check into your credit score and see exactly where you stand. But I mean, better than all of that, Credit Sesame also goes way beyond just the simple score. They'll give you personalized financial tips and tools to make better use of the financial information that you've got. And beyond that, what is also great is they give you ID protection up to $50,000. All of this totally for free, and no, it's not one of those things where you have to plug in a credit card and then worry later that you're going to get a bill. No credit card needed. Free really does mean free here. Also, I should note that some people might be worried that checking your credit score can actually hurt your credit, but with Credit Sesame, that is not the case. Getting your credit report card from Credit Sesame will not affect your credit score. Now, look, I'm not American, so I couldn't use this service personally, but someone on the TIFO team who is an American did, and then basically I had a chat about it with them so I could bring this video to you. They were surprised at how easy it was to get started, given experience they've had with this sort of thing in the past. They were also impressed with the interface and how nicely all of the information was presented, and also how deep it went. So look, it's totally for free. You have nothing to lose. Just head over to creditsesame.com to check it out, or click the link in the description below. Thanks to Credit Sesame for the sponsorship, and let's just roll into today's video. In Article 1 of the US Constitution, ratified on June the 21st, 1788, Congress was granted the power to coin money and regulate its value, but not to issue paper money. The result of the near-complete devaluation of the paper money printed to fund the revolution, many delegates of the Constitutional Convention simply had lost faith in the efficacy of paper money and made no provision for it. Thus, for the first 73 years of the country's history, the United States relied on coins that it minted, foreign coins, since the US lacked sufficient precious metals to mint enough of their own, and paper money issued by private, state-chartered banks, producing bills of various designs and values. By the time the US Congress had gotten around to issuing its own paper money, approximately 8,000 different private entities within the United States had already produced some form of paper currency. With the resulting confusion over valuation and authenticity, counterfeiting of the private notes was absolutely rampant. Thus, when Uncle Sam decided it needed to issue paper currency of its own to fund the Union effort in the Civil War, first in the form of 50 million in demand notes in 1861 and later passing the Legal Tender Act of 1862, authorizing another $150 million, which is about $4 billion today of US notes, the possibility of forgery, well, it was forefront on everyone's minds. And by the way, a fun fact here, Abraham Lincoln officially established the Secret Service on the day he was assassinated. This new organization was tasked not with protecting him, though, but rather stamping out the rampant counterfeiting. Now, this all brings us back to green money. While it's often stated, even by otherwise reputable sources, that it isn't definitively known why the color green was chosen for use with the United States' paper money, the truth of the matter is that after an amazing amount of digging, it turns out the reason for choosing green couldn't be better documented. The documentation is primarily courtesy of a case brought before the New York Supreme Court in 1865. It's Tracy R. Edson and the American Banknote Company. In this case, numerous primary documents explain in painstaking detail why the color green was chosen for American currency. With a little further digging, more of the backstory was also revealed. Now, funnily enough, it all actually started with a Canadian, and this was Dr. Thomas Sterry Hunt. In 1857, at the behest of the president of the Citibank of Montreal, William Workman, Dr. Hunt developed and patented in Canada a new anti-counterfeiting ink. You see, the Citibank of Montreal, like so many other banks, issued their own notes. As was the case with other institutions of the day, their notes suffered from rampant counterfeiting counterfeiting, thanks in part to the advent of certain photographic technologies. And at this point, another Canadian enters the picture, and this would be George Matthews. Upon learning of this new anti-counterfeiting ink, Matthews almost immediately purchased the rights to it from Hunt. He then turned around and patented the ink in the United States, patent number 17,688 by the way, and claimed that he had invented it and explained that the ink was made from calcined green oxide of chromium, which I mix with burned or boiled linseed oil, sometimes called printer's varnish, in the manner usual in preparing ink for printing banknotes or other instruments by either of the above processes of printing. After patenting it in the US, Matthews turned around and licensed all rights to this patent to one Tracy Edson, who, along with his cohorts Rawdon, Wright and Hatch, within a year would partner up with several other of the most prominent security printers in the United States to form the American Banknote Company in 1858. But right now we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Now, upon getting the rights to this ink, Edson Co, the first thing they did was make sure that the ink did what it was supposed to, and that was make banknotes harder to counterfeit. They then announced, in a letter I'm going to read in a moment, that they had a method to finally beat counterfeiters. It read, "To the banking institutions of the United States, in consequence of the great danger to our paper currency from successful counterfeits made by photography and kindred processes, it has become evident that a new security is needed, which, while it shall perfectly protect our banknotes from photographic imitations and from alterations in their denominational value, shall at the same time preserve that security which is always afforded by artistic and highly finished engraving. The undersigned beg leave respectfully to announce to the banking institutions of the United States that they have carefully investigated this subject and that they are now prepared to furnish the most perfect possible protection against all the above descriptions of fraud. The process consists in the use of two permanent inks conjointly in printing banknotes and other documents representing value. One of these is the ordinary black banknote printing ink, which, having a basis of carbon, is insoluble and indestructible. The other is an equally insoluble and indestructible green-colored ink, which cannot be removed from the paper without also removing the black ink and thus destroying the note. This is an established principle in photographic chemistry that red, yellow, and green colors act upon the photographic plates almost precisely like black, so that lines or figures of these colors will appear black in photographic copies. The use of colors has therefore been resorted to as a protection against photographic counterfeiting. Unfortunately, all the colored inks heretofore used upon banknotes for this purpose, as red, yellow, and blue, can be removed with more or less facility by chemical means without disturbing the note itself when printed in the black carbon ink. These colors being removed, the black can be copied by photography, and the colors being afterwards added by lithography, or otherwise a counterfeit is obtained, which is the more dangerous from the fancied security afforded by the colors. The use of fugitive black or blue inks printed upon a colored ground has been resorted to as protection against photography, but these inks are liable to fade on exposure to light or air, and as it is possible to efface from notes thus printed the black design by chemical means without disturbing the red or yellow ground, and to print another in its place, the use of fugitive inks afford great facilities for alterations, while the distinct characteristics of the fine engraving are lost and the note is rendered easier of imitation by the ordinary counterfeiter and its detection more difficult. The use of black carbon ink above referred to for printing banknotes conjointly with an equally insoluble and indestructible colored ink in connection with the highest style of line engraving would unite in the greatest degree the best safeguards against all the various species of fraud to which surety paper is exposed. A banknote thus printed in two permanent inks would be protected against the possibility of imitation by photography and by the lithographic and anastatic processes of copying, while its denominational value could not be altered by any chemical means. Such a note could also be made to unite the security afforded by the highest artistic excellence against counterfeiting by the engraving process, and the beauty of design and general appearance of the note would be preserved. The green-colored ink, recently patented, has been submitted to the examination of several of our most distinguished chemists and other gentlemen who, from their practical experience, are competent to decide a question of this kind. They have subjected it to the most severe tests known to chemical science, and the ink having been produced by them to process the requisite properties, we offer it with entire confidence as affording the desired protection when applied in the manner above proposed. Referring to the accompanying documents and specimen of printing in the two permanent inks, we are, very respectfully, your obedient servants, Rawdon, Wright, Hatch, and Edson. As mentioned in the letter, also furnished as supporting evidence of their claims were letters from numerous chemists and photographers attesting to the fact that, despite their sincerest efforts, they could find no way of perfectly copying the banknotes that had both the carbon black ink and the new patent green tint ink. For instance, in this letter from photographer Charles D. Fredericks, dated May 29, 1857, he notes, "Messrs. Rawdon, Wright, Hatch, and Edson. Gentlemen, agreeably to your request, I have made numerous experiments by various processes upon the green-tinted banknotes submitted by you for the purpose of determining the anti-photographic power of the green ink in which they were printed. The result is that, in all cases, the portions printed in green, as well as those printed in black, appear only in black in the photographic copy. And I do not hesitate to say that it is impossible to make a counterfeit by photography of any banknote upon which this green tinge is printed by you in connection with the black ink ordinarily used in printing banknotes. Respectfully, your obedient servant, C. D. Fredericks." Needless to say, the new anti-counterfeiting ink was a hit, and it was adopted by numerous banks for their banknotes of various designs. In 1860, after these types of banknotes had been in the wild for a couple of years, notes using this ink still seemed impervious to counterfeiting by ordinary measures, as noted by Professor Wolcott Gibb of New York on June 24, 1860. In reply to your letter, I have to say that I have seen no reason whatsoever to change the opinion which I expressed in my report of June 3, 1857, in relation to the durability of the patent green tint. No chemical agent has been discovered which will destroy its color when properly prepared, and I consider it as one of the most fixed and permanent tints which chemistry can provide. So, when the federal government was looking to print the currency that would become known as greenbacks in 1861, they ordered the American Banknote Company to print them using carbon black and their patent green ink, earning the company a cool $5, that's $133 today, per 1,000 notes that they printed. Of course, as so often happens, it was soon discovered that at least some counterfeiters had little trouble figuring out ways to remove the green ink without harming the paper or black ink, and thus the currency was easily counterfeited as described in the preceding Edson Co letter. The war against counterfeited currency continued, and still continues to this day, with green remaining a primary color of US paper money through it all. While in modern times this is more due to tradition than anything else, there was a prime opportunity to change the principal coloring in 1929 when smaller notes were introduced and things became a bit more standardized with some designs. For instance, earlier editions of US currency had an average dimension of 7.375 by 3.125 inches rather than the current 6.125 by 2.625 inches. However, according to the US Bureau of Engraving and Printing, the US chose to stick with the green color because the then incarnation of it was still relatively resistant to chemical and physical changes compared to other readily available inks. Further, they had large quantities of it available, and they felt that green was psychologically identified with the strong and stable credit of the government. And now for some bonus facts. By law, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Treasury has been authorized to engrave and print U.S. paper currency, and he has broad discretion over who to put on a bill, with the only original caveat being that any portrait be of a deceased individual. In 1929, Secretary Andrew Mellon appointed a special committee to decide on who would be so honored. Although at first the committee had thought that portraits should be limited to presidents, they made exception for the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury during the Civil War who fostered the early days of the national banking system, Salmon P. Chase, and of course, Benjamin Franklin. And now for another bonus fact. Putting the motto "In God We Trust" on paper money was adopted into law in 1955 in response to fears of the supposed ties between godlessness and socialism during the McCarthy era. It first appeared on greenbacks in 1957. So I really hope you liked that video. Just a reminder to check out creditsesame.com, link in the description below, to get your 100% free credit report card. And thanks to Credit Sesame for sponsoring, and thank you for watching.